Okay, so I believe for this episode we're talking about AI, and I wanted to give like the quick, I guess, review or rundown, and then we can dig in. The way I think about it is AI is obviously everywhere, and consultants, marketers, founders, product managers, like pretty much everyone I think is starting to use AI more in their everyday work. And I think like the fundamental question is, can you and should you just outsource everything to AI and do very little, I guess, of the um like manual work, so to speak, that you would typically see like in marketing or product management or whatever. And I think that this is a timely topic because we're seeing more and more and more AI powered platforms pop up, um, AI products that are designed for taking entire roles or tasks or jobs to be done, so to speak, off of someone's plate. For example, there's Chat PRD, which is like a PRD creator leveraging LLMs and AI. Of course, anyone now can just access ChatGPT, Claude, etc. There are also now like agents and like workflow like AI platforms coming out, and people are getting more sophisticated in how they're layering AI usage. And I think the fundamental question is like, when and where should you use it? When and where does it not make sense or it's risky? And based on like what stage of growth you're in, when is it like like more helpful than not? And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to unpack with you today.
Yeah, it's a great topic, obviously.
Yeah. So I want to actually kick off, Kim, with your thoughts on this, because I feel like you're like DemandMaven's like AI guru. Like I feel like you're the one who's finding all the cool stuff.
Yeah, I know I've been into it lately, like for good and bad.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
You know,
Yeah.
because right, for better or for worse. Because sometimes you go down a rabbit hole and you're like, this just took me more time.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what the point we're going to get at too is, when does it make sense and when is it does it really not?
What's been exciting you about like this new space?
So I think if you really can hone in on what the AI is actually good at, and it's funny because a lot of people will say something like, or like I read an article recently that was like, well, I just made Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT act like a student in my 201 CS class at Cornell. Right. And we're going to see if they could be our freshman students in this class. But what's funny is an LLM is not a student. Like we teach and educate humans differently than you would teach an AI. So it's almost like it's a flawed experience. It's funny and it was a funny video. And it like, of course they got a C plus or whatever, like Claude got a C plus. So they can't, they failed basically because you need like a 2.5 GPA to like continue on in studying your chosen major. But they were doing it just like giving them all the assignments like the students were. So the way you're teaching students in a class, in a CS class, is different than you should be teaching an LLM.
Right. Right.
So to me, it's like, what are they good at? What's the AI good at? And then how can I supplement based on how I'm working today? So what interests me is like, okay, if it's really good at taking a whole bunch of data and holding in its head better than my brain can, let's use that and do some pattern matching because it's good at that. But when I ask it to write exactly like me, it's never turns out right. And of course it's going to get better. But so, what excites me now is like, okay, what is it good at right now? We know it's going to change. And in 3 to 5 years, right, it's going to be real different. So let's just assume that. But let's not like rip out everything we're doing. But how can we, I really like figuring out now, like what can AI do for me right now in my current work?
Yeah, I agree. I feel very similarly, and I was pretty skeptical at first. Like I think, when did ChatGPT come out publicly? At least was it 3 years ago now?
And in 23.
Yeah. 3. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. About 3 years ago. I remember being very skeptical at first. It has definitely gotten better, and I think I'm in a similar boat. I think I'm much more like, how can we, like, what are some of the things that with a certain margin of error, we're comfortable with AI helping us like shorten the steps, and what is still mission critical for a human to still think about and do. And yeah, I think I'm similar. I think I'm very like AI assisted, rather than like truly AI outsourced or led. And I do think like there are some like likely some things that AI can just own, and it always like you can trust it again with like a certain margin of error, because it's going to have error. Like it does hallucinate, it does make mistakes. It also just like will randomly break and like forget its rules. So then you have to like think about, and this is where workflow and like AI agents come into play, because you can kind of break up the steps so that doesn't happen as often. But yeah, I think I'm very similar. And I think too, it started internally with like DemandMaven. Like, what are some of the steps and things that we do that an AI can handle with some acceptable margin of error that we're comfortable with? And I think that's the caveat, is like, you have to assume that there will be errors. What margin of error are you willing to accept? And not to say that we are always perfect. What is interesting about these LLMs is that they do pick up on different things maybe than like you would, but also with the right guidance and inputs, they can also create outputs that are very, very, very close to like what you would just do. Mm-hmm. And then obviously there is always the margin of error. And that's just something that you just always have to like be prepared to, like, it's part of the trade-off, I think, and the acceptance of your usage. But yeah, I think I'm the same. I think, in our work where we really leverage it the most, definitely with like deliverables making. Mm-hmm. We've taught AI and LLMs like how to make certain types of deliverables. Yeah. So it started out, I think, with like deliverables creation. And then it turned into helping us analyze like large data sets, which I will say LLMs are mostly like, again, 95% spot on. It does make errors. Giving it like large CSVs of data, like survey data, or we just did an analysis, like a large analysis of, it was a feature request board. It was like a Monday board, and it had 1,100 or 1,200 feature requests in it. And they were all categorized. And the way that they enter the board is through a form. Like the data gets entered from a form that gets automatically put into like a Monday board. And the Monday board has kind of just like been in a graveyard for a long time. Like no one really looks at it. But it's like 1,200 feature requests over the last 2 to 3 years from this client that we have. And they really wanted help like prioritizing the data in it and like really understanding like what's actually in it. And so my favorite use case for LLMs have been certainly with helping it create certain deliverables, but then also like analyzing large data sets, with the caveat, however, that you can just give it the data and be like, tell me what's in this, or like, can you give me like a readout, or can you do like an analysis of what's in this data? And it'll do, it'll do like its little Thomas the Tank Engine best try of like, yep, I'm going to tell you all the things. But I think my favorite application is when you spend like 30 minutes to an hour kind of reviewing it yourself first, and then coming away with like, okay, I want it to specifically tell me like these things, and then anything else that it might consider to be important. And then its analysis ends up being a bit more focused and tailored, and it's not just like kind of like a random, The thing that's the most annoying to me about LLMs is how different the quality can be, or even like sometimes it's really difficult to get it to follow the same format. Mm-hmm. Between certain types of like analyses. Like one day you'll tell Claude, okay, analyze this data, and it'll give you like this readout in a particular format and style and structure. You do the same thing again the next day, and it gives you something different. The same thing is true for like, okay, here's the transcript from the last podcast that Kim and I did. Create the YouTube, description, and create the YouTube timestamps that I can like copy paste in there and call it a day. And it will have a different structure every time, without like really hyper specific instructions. And even then it'll still break sometimes, and it'll be like, oh, I forgot, sorry. And you're like, dude, anyway. Yeah. I really like those instances and use cases. Although I will say I've never felt comfortable being like, here's all my data, what's the strategy? Like I've never trusted it with that. There are just so many, it's too complex in my opinion for like an LLM. Like I do think you have to tell it what you want first, and it can kind of help you fill in the gaps.
Yeah. And I think, so that's where context comes into play. And so I've been really into Claude Code lately, and using Claude Code, but having my own context files that I also index. And these are all text files, like MD files, because LLMs, that's what they are good at reading first. They can read them really quickly and really well. Mm-hmm. So, and then you're essentially telling the LLM what to look at when. And when you create index files, so say you have like, a folder for a project you're doing, you have different folders. Each of those folders can have like an index file you create that tells the LLM what it's about. And those can be updated over time. So then you can be telling the AI, so like that's your brain that is updating if your strategy is evolving or whatever it is. And then you're essentially telling the LLM it's referencing that so that it's really thinking from your strategy. So like I think that's where kind of people get frustrated, but there's also the human side needs to be able to build things out in a better way to adapt to how the LLM is thinking. Because yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to get context raw. If you're deep into a project, it's going to forget how to format things. Yeah. So I like making sure like that you're still making your context and your strategy is always very clear. And then you're kind of pointing at it, pointing the LLM to it strategically.
Totally. Totally. And this is kind of where that brings us into the topic of like when you shouldn't use AI. And I do want to circle back to other examples of when you totally should. Like, yes, like you should use AI to help assist like your work because it has certainly saved me countless hours. Like I can't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think what I also like too is it is a little bit of like a creative process. I think what I recommend the most for people is that they never just take what it spits out at like, like that you take it at face value and that you kind of use it to trigger and prompt other questions or other ways to think about it. Like I almost never just like take what Claude spits out and like copy paste that as a deliverable. Like I almost always like take the parts that I like and then rework the other parts. Like it's a co-creation type process. Like I never am just like, yup, copy paste looks good. I'm usually like really combing through it and kind of really thinking about like, do I agree with that? Is that the perspective I actually have? And then kind of making edits and modifications from there. But what I will say though is like when you should not use AI. There was a time, I don't know if you remember this, we worked with a client where we were doing jobs to be done interviews and um I can't remember if they attended. I think this might have been before we had founders and teams attend the calls.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if they attended them or not, but I do distinctly remember. No, we did. They did. They did. I do remember this actually. Okay, I remember now. They did attend the calls. They actually attended the interviews, which we do recommend now in our process. We used to do them split up where we would go into a hole, do research, come back, and be like, "Look, we made this," and then the teams would be like, "I don't believe anything that you're telling me." So now we encourage founders and teams to actually attend the interviews. That way they hear it too, like from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So what we would do is after every interview, we would have a debrief and we would map the four forces, jobs to be done style interview. We would map the four forces right after the interview, like with the founder and the team. And I'll never forget, we get through like the fourth or fifth interview where we map the jobs. And then the founder's like, oh, well, you guys give me transcripts. I'll just take the transcripts and tell like ChatGPT to spit out jobs to be done. And I'll never forget, like ChatGPT spits out what it thinks is jobs to be done. And it's not that it was wrong, is the thing. It was just much more that it was not at all accurate, strategic, had no context at all about the business and what type of jobs to be done matters and what type of job actually enables the work. Like what style of jobs to be done actually enables progress and growth. And that's where like a jobs to be done expert can help because there are different styles of jobs to be done. There are different schools of thought. Which school of thought are you in? And similarly, there are different types of jobs to focus on. There's functional jobs, emotional jobs, social jobs, and each of those styles of jobs have a different function and they have different purpose. And what was really clear was at the time, at least, ChatGPT, like again, it's not actually thinking, it's an LLM, which means it's stringing together words that sound good. And if you're not an expert, you're going to think that that's like the word of God. And you're just like, wow, it's so smart. But when you're a noob, you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know that this is actually kind of goofy and actually not technically jobs to be done. Like it was just kind of like spitting out something random. Now, this was a couple of years ago. I do think it's better now. I know Claude, for example, does have concepts of like jobs to be done. Like it understands like functional jobs, social jobs, blah, blah, blah. And it generally understands, ODI style of jobs, outcome driven innovation versus switch style, which is more like Bob Moesta and Clayton Christensen. All that to say, so I'll never forget. And so, the founder was like, look, ChatGPT like did your job. I was like, actually it didn't. And I can show you exactly how, where, and why. And I can also show you exactly like where our interpretation actually helps you better unlock growth than what ChatGPT just spit out. And once I made that really clear, it also became very clear, like, oh, I can't just trust everything that ChatGPT says. Now, to be fair, the LLMs are better, they are smarter, and I think that they do have a more solid understanding. But I also think too, like when you are the expert, you can give the LLM better inputs, and you can also give it better guidance, and it actually can help enable your work based on like it's basically like standing on the shoulder of giants versus like asking it to do something on its own and it not necessarily having the necessary context. So it kind of just like spits out whatever it thinks sounds smart, but it isn't actually yet.
Right.
So,
And
oh, go
even
ahead.
now it is better, like you said, but still like because AI it'll pull themes. So if you're doing interviews and you have transcripts, it'll pull themes, but it wants consensus. So like
Mm-hmm.
it might conflate a couple things that are said in different interview transcripts, but
Mm-hmm.
without the eye of a jobs expert or a growth expert. Like you're not,
Mm-hmm.
it's not identifying gaps that you could strategically say, here's a gap and now we're going to work on this. It's going to be more general and provide themes. So like you said, it's not wrong, but it might be like, well, users want better onboarding as a general theme, but it's not identifying the gaps and the few different ways people said things to kind of come to conclusions that you as the jobs expert would.
It tends to miss nuance for sure. I also find it yeah, like I completely agree. It is really good at finding the on paper themes because LLMs can't understand human emotion. It can't understand hesitation. If it's getting text transcripts, it can only go off of those exact words on the page. So it does tend to it takes things and interprets things almost literally in a way. So if you want like a literal interpretation of what's happening, it's gonna do great at that because it's all text based. But what I find too, and we've had like Claude and like some of the LLMs, like, hey, tell me like what are the jobs to be done? Like if this is what a jobs to be done brief looks like from DemandMaven, if this what a job insights brief looks like from us, and if we give you these 10 or 12 transcripts, spit out what you think the job insights brief should be. And it's almost always like, I don't have a better word other than like goofy. Like they're usually kind of goofy. Like it's usually like it's almost like it just can't read the energy of something. And that is, I think, the intuitive power of humans that LLMs just can't replicate. So it does a really good job of like what are the functional jobs, and it tries to extrapolate, I think, what the vibes are. But it usually ends up being a little goofy. And so then we're like, okay, well, we got to redo this. But this is where we've learned in the past, like, it's actually better for us to map what we think the jobs are ourselves as humans and then tell ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, okay, these are the jobs. These are the interviews that fit into each of the jobs. Now create the job insights brief based on, and we'll feed it like our notes, we'll feed it our debrief notes. So it has all the information that it needs. And now it just has to create the document, which that it does excellent at. But I think in terms of like interpreting certain information, not necessarily going to be great. So all of the use cases where I would say proceed with caution, like don't just outsource this completely to LLMs, would be in scenarios where you're running interviews, you're trying to make strategic decisions, or you're trying to find strategic gaps, and you are relying solely on LLMs and you're not doing any human intervention at all. That's going to be risky. That will show up in product. So particularly like product management and also like prioritization. There's also like when you're making strategic decisions about marketing and go to market. So your positioning, when you're making strategic decisions about, like what are the primary jobs that we're trying to focus on. I think the same is true if you're asking LLMs to analyze like large data sets around like customer interviews. Don't get me wrong, I think it's going to do a great job of giving you like the high level information. It certainly will give you what feels like nuanced information, like, oh, yep, this small percentage of people said these things. And that's going to feel like, oh, yeah, like that's so cool and so valuable. But again, without human interpretation and without guidance, not that it goes off the rails, it just never gets to anything deeper and possibly more meaningful. And I think that's so again, if it's outsourcing like a large part of marketing thinking and like the work that like a product marketer does, which is how do we think about our competitive differentiators? How do we think about particularly competitive differentiators? Because if like, it is just going off of transcripts and words and not necessarily like reading between the lines a little bit, it doesn't do a good job of that. And that's where human interpretation comes in. So like while customers may say that things are easy to use or we like this or what have you, a lot of lot of that though is, and Bob Moessa actually talks about this, you almost have to take what customers literally say with a grain of salt, and you actually have to look back at the past conversation and do an interpretation based on their reactions to that. It's kind of like when you ask customers what features they want, and then they're like, I don't know, I'm not really sure what else it can do. But then like when you think about the whole conversation you had, actually they really wanted these things, they just didn't know how to say it. That's the trade-off of just using LLMs to interpret data.
Right.
And that will show up in marketing, that'll show up in product, that'll show up in any customer facing sales as well. Like, yes, you can certainly just go off of what people say, but if no one's interpreting the entire context of the conversation and kind of poking holes in like other areas, then you leave a lot of stones unturned, and kind of what you are left with is potentially maybe more rudimentary and like surface level.
Mm-hmm.
But that's assuming that there's no human intervention. If there is human intervention, then you can get to those like subcutaneous layers, so to speak. And that's what I push for. That's also how we use it. Like we don't just like let LLMs to their own devices and put that in front of clients as like, yep, here it is. AI did all the thinking, but actually like it's not actually thinking. It's just predictive stringing of words that sounds cool, and it has its own like judgment layer for what that is.
Yeah, I think that was the article I was referencing, or whatever I saw about the CS class. There was something about that it had Claude build whatever they were coding, and it created it and wrote "Hello World World." Like, because like Claude, the LLM knew like "Hello World" is like a standard way that a developer would like, when they first go live with their code. And it was like
So
Claude
funny.
thought, well, I need to add more to this. So it duplicated the word world, which is, you know what I mean? It's silly. Like no human would do that.
A little goofy. Some parts of it very useful. Like,
yeah. And so absolutely. Oh, and we see this more and more, analyzing competitors, work that would take a human a lot of time to gather data on the internet, on websites, right? Absolutely use AI to pull data for you. That would take a human a long time. I think having AI collect data from sales recordings and all that, and then it's a matter of deciding how you're going to use it. But
and
LLMs
also too,
are really
like,
good at collecting and storing that data.
100%. And also too, like where and when to dig deeper, and when not to just take things at face value. So I will say, like, I think one of my favorite, I guess, and this is kind of what I was talking about with like the creative process of using LLMs. One of my favorite creative processes is, like have it analyze the sales calls. And when it does, it might trigger questions for you of like, oh, that's interesting. I want to learn more about that. Claude, can you source this for me? Like when did people say these things? And it's like, oh yeah, Brittany said this, Masha said that. And then like, and I will say it does do a relatively decent job of like not always hallucinating. Sometimes it does like literally hallucinate stuff and you're like, that never happened. But I do like the creative process of like, it gives its high level interpretation. And then you can use that to then dig deeper and inform yourself even more fully. Because I will say, I don't necessarily like taking it at face value all the time. Or sorry, I don't like just accepting what it says all the time. I do like to not just, I don't necessarily like validate it. I'm not trying to like catch it in its errors. I think it's just more like, are there things that it missed? And chances are it absolutely missed things that it wouldn't have been able to interpret anyway. And I think that I think is fun though. I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily. Like, yeah, it would be great if like the LLMs could just do the thinking too. But then I think that would mean that we literally don't have jobs. Like if it really could do that, we would be replaced for real. So that is kind of though like how I like to use it too. We're actually in the process of that now where are like the CEO at one of my clients, they're working on kind of like what's like the internal brain for the company and leveraging, I think, Gemini for this. And basically, how can we automate the storage and analysis of all of like the customer facing, whether it's support tickets, sales calls, customer interviews, UX interviews, how does all of that get aggregated into the same place? And then creating like workflows on the back end to run analyses. Excuse me. And I do think that there's value to this, and also too possibly even like something that you can query and be like, can you tell me more about blah? Like in the last month, what were the top problems or challenges that prospects had in the sales demos? I think that there certainly is value to that. I think it'll be very challenging because you really have to get everyone on board. I think part of the issues with this is that everyone has to, or at least leadership has to, have a very strong data collection and data analysis arm. And also, individual contributors have to have a strong sense of like, I want to use this. And I don't think that that's going to be easy for all teams to embody. Some companies will just take naturally to this, and I think other companies will struggle because not everyone maybe values it the same way or thinks of it like that.
Right.
That's kind of where there's trade-off.
Right, because essentially this is data analyst work, right? So
Right.
companies that have data analysts, junior data analysts, senior data analysts, their jobs kind of are going away because AI is now can do this. But obviously you still need someone orchestrating it and deciding if the output is okay and understanding how to do it. Companies that don't, have that, like this client you're talking about, it is going to be, they don't have that muscle yet.
Right. It's really business intelligence. And I think what's cool about it is like it's giving smaller teams earlier access to business intelligence as a function. Like I remember at Moz, like we had I think both an internal BI team and a BI team that was like outsourced, like third party. The relationship with them was long term, and I remember like we worked with them like for forever. Like they kind of just felt like they were part of the team, but they had like different email addresses. But we also had an internal BI team as well, and that is kind of like the cool part about this. But we typically don't see that function in a SaaS, at least for like a while. So it's cool, that LLMs are giving us the ability to create internal intelligence. But with creating internal intelligence comes the responsibility of it. Like with great power comes great responsibility. But then also like your team has to actually care about that data. Like they actually have to care about the insights. If they don't, they're not going to use it and it's not going to matter. And it's just going to like all of that excitement is going to live up at the top, where basically you have a really excited CEO about AI and no one else is. And or the opposite. The CEO is really excited about the insights and the information, but no one else is because maybe they're not strategic enough to use it or they're too busy or whatever. It's not an internal cultural value.
Right. Or it's not clear how to take action on it.
Also that. So I think, yeah, it's definitely going to create challenges, I think, for organizations who want to use more of this. It's kind of, in a way, it's actually no different to me than like the same challenge that internal researchers have, where it's like, like part of the reason why teams don't invest in research departments is because you have to care about the information. And I think that's the irony about hyper investing in LLMs internally, is that if you don't have a culture of data gathering and data interpretation and data actioning, then it doesn't matter. Like, no one's going to use it. You're gonna build all this knowledge and no one's going to use it. It's the same thing that happens when we used to do our projects. When we would troubleshoot growth, we would go and do our research and then come back, and then everyone's like, I don't care. I wasn't part of it. I don't care.
Right.
I'm like, that's cute. Tell us how that's going to help us grow. And it's the same problem. It's just on the one hand easier and cheaper, but at the same exact time harder, because it's not necessarily a human interpretation. It's almost like watered. It's like a little watered down, and that may or may not be better. Right. It's certainly more accessible. I think that's what I'm excited about, though. Like I'm excited about the accessibility of the data.
Yes.
But if no one knows what to do with it, or what to query, or like what information actually matters, that's where it falls apart.
Yeah. I think one thing I'm really excited about too is I don't have a development background, no coding experience. Like now I have access to things that I normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because AI gets me to that part. I can be a data analyst and code without knowing code, which is very exciting.
Yep. Vibe code.
Yeah.
I got a question recently. It was like to feature in a blog post. I'm part of this like little mini group of like content creators where writers really, and I'm one of the like, I guess like subject matter experts. Yeah, I'm a SME, and they'll ping me with questions to feature in like an article like every now and again. And one of the questions recently was like, what are your thoughts on AI and product management and development? I think it's a theme that we're seeing right now, at least. And AI and LLMs are going to change, obviously, and it's going to be something different in like 2 to 3 more years. But the theme is ultimately like, if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to seem amazing. If you do know what you're doing, then you know like how much to trust it and how much faith to put in it. and you'll probably get more out of it because like you know more. But yes, like the power of it for someone who's new to something. So like I think engineering is actually a really good use case where there are different functions where like the more you know, the better it's going to work out. And there are also departments or functions where like the less you know, the more it can help fill gaps and it still be good. I think engineering is a good use case. Design is actually like UX design and like product design is actually not far behind. Like Figma Make, my husband uses it and he's like, listen, like if you know what you're doing, it's incredible. If you don't know what you're doing, it might not do exactly what you need, but he's able to prototype very quickly now. And like all he really has to do is kind of sprinkle his like, you know, UX design fairy dust on top and put very minimal effort into basically completely fully working comps. Like he's like, I mean, he was like, no, it takes him a minute to prompt, but it's not nearly, but like that time prompting is this much versus building it all manually. So like, he's like, you know, Figma Make is cool. And I'm excited to actually get into that because that's my number one hang up. That and like development, obviously, like I don't know, like there's something about my brain that's just like, you don't want to code. I'll do front end, but I don't want to do any back end. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not actually a maker, guys. I'm just an artist. I am not a maker. I'm just an artist and also like, you know, a leader when it matters. But yeah, I think engineering is a great use case because it is easier now than ever to build apps with no code, but also now to code. I think that's really, really, really cool and exciting.
Yeah.
And I do think though, with like the more that you learn about engineering, like the better, the more you're gonna like, the more value you're probably gonna get out of it. But I do think I think it's probably easier to use it for engineering than like some of the other functions. Copywriting, I will say, okay, I'm gonna edit my words here. Writing copy, I think, is different than like conversion copywriting. I don't think it's great at conversion copywriting. I think it is great though at very basic copywriting. Like if you just need to get an email out or write a landing page or whatever with the right prompts, I think it'll do a great job. Without the right prompts, I think it's really easy to make a mess or to just like be diluted. It dilutes so quick. Like, and that's what I fear actually more than anything is how much is this diluting versus like it has a clear vision for like what edge to have. And I do feel like now in SaaS, like things need edges. I don't think it can all just be diluted anymore. I think it has to, like if it's too watered down, it's obvious.
Right.
But there is Ahrefs did a really good video on this. I think you might appreciate this, Kim. They did a video where their head of product marketing, or he actually, I can't remember. I can't remember his role. He's a head of marketing, I believe. But you know, Tim is VP of marketing, and he's got his team of product marketers, demand gen, etc. And they did this YouTube video about like we outsourced all of our marketing to AI, and here's what happened. It was like a 20-minute video and it was really, really, really funny because like they were able to create a workflow that did create like a pretty solid like 80% of the way output, but it took a few weeks. Like it took like 30 days, like it took like a month to get there, but it was really, really, really funny because like Tim, so basically like their litmus test was, can we submit this to Tim and he not think it's AI?
I love that.
And so Tim would like read it and be like, is this? And he would be like, that's such a weird phrase. Did AI write this? It was really, really funny. And then like by the end of it, they were like, actually, there are a couple of sections that aren't great, but I do think, you know, like if you adjusted these two things, like it would pass muster, basically. It was really, really, really funny. And I think like there was a product marketer involved who was like, oh yeah, no, this is, let's like rewrite this. And so then the person who hosted the video was like, okay, I've gotten feedback. Now we're going to go and edit like our model and like tell Claude some more things and like fix our workflow. And he went through like 4 or 5 iterations before like the content quality like passed muster. It was pretty cool. But it was also like, it made it really clear like what the gaps were. But they wouldn't have known without going through that process. I'll have to send it to you. It was so good.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was so good.
Yeah. I do. It's a good point of like, so AI raises the floor, but if you're already a copywriter or UI designer or an engineer, like especially engineer, I think the use case, because that's what LLMs are built on, code that developers and engineers understand.
Totally.
So it's like they have the leg up, or a system, someone that knows business intelligence or business process management. The way AI tools are working together in organizations, like is how like a business process management system might work in an enterprise company. So if you understand that, so yeah, if you're understanding what good conversion copywriting is, or have that background, then you can adopt, right, the AI output.
Totally.
Or better yet, catch when it's bad.
Right. Exactly.
Catch when it's bad design. Catch when it's bad writing or where it's bad, and then just fix that.
Yeah. Yes. So it gets you like 80% of the way, or in some cases, sometimes even like 60 or 70% of the way is still worth it. Because that might be hours and hours and hours of your time.
Right.
But yeah, I have not yet gotten into the world of using it to code or like build apps yet. I'm just so like gun shy when it comes to backend development. I don't know and I think it's just because like, I don't know, I understand HTML and CSS. I am working on, and I guess part of the point is that I don't have to understand it, but I do think like you have to have the desire of making stuff. Like you have to like making things, and I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna get there.
Yeah, you will. You'll go into a rabbit hole. But even like I don't have like I'm playing around with different MCPs and like kind of like agents, but I don't have like automated agents running on like a separate laptop right now. Like I have a GitHub account, but I'm not storing my code there.
You have
like,
a GitHub account?
I know. Look at me.
Wow. Kim, you have a GitHub.
I told you because I'm using Claude Code.
I'm so behind. And that's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I am in a terminal every day, but it's funny because so I have an operations background. Mm-hmm. So like my first use case with Claude Code has been, let me build my own task management system. And my own, I basically have like an intern that turned into an executive assistant that turned into kind of a chief of staff that I've built through Claude Code, which that's fun for me because that's what I do and like to do. That's what I naturally do. So I've, kind of used the benefits of AI to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's really getting into kind of like the automated agents and stuff hurts my brain a little bit.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. What, and I'll ask this question, then we'll wrap up because I know you have to go. But what are like the wildest AI use cases or like products that you've seen? There are 3 that come to mind that might trigger a few for you, but are there any that...
Yeah, why don't you start? Yeah.
I'll start. Okay. There are 2 off the top of my head, and I'm sure as we talk about it, more will come to mind. I've been talking to Lennybot. Have you met Lennybot?
Yes, I have seen Lennybot.
Okay.
I enjoy this. This is up your alley, Asia.
This is so... I'm fascinated by this. I have every once in a while I'll use ChatGPT for therapy, which I do not recommend, by the way, because AI can and will cause psychosis if you are predisposed to psychosis. And also, actually, as I'm talking about this, there actually just was a study that suggested that even if you're not predisposed to psychosis, it can also still trigger psychosis. So you're really not supposed to use ChatGPT for therapy. Don't do it. Every now and again, though, I'll break my own rule. And I'll be like, am I crazy? And it's like, no, you're not crazy, Asia. Actually, this was a really salient, it's always like very affirming, which is dangerous as hell. Because it never really pushes back unless you train it to in a very specific way. But anyway, I digress. Okay, Lennybot. So I was on Lenny Ratchetsky's website, and I should listen to more of Lenny's podcast. I think I just haven't because he has so much content and I'm very overwhelmed.
It's a lot. He has a lot of great content.
He has a lot of great, and that's the thing too, is I know it's all great and I want to listen to all of it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I'm just like, there's just so much. But he has, and I think it's powered by a platform called Delphi or Delphi.
Yes.
But he has a Lennybot, which is basically like an AI created to like his persona and all of his insight packaged into an LLM. And also, it's kind of like a low-key search tool. So if you want recommendations for certain types of podcasts or content that he's written or like episodes that he's recorded, it will actually cite and source and reference those episodes. So it's kind of like, as you're asking Lennybot questions, it'll be like, you should go it'll still explain stuff, but it'll be like, you can learn more by listening to Claire Vaux's episode where we cover that exact topic. But Lennybot is fascinating too, because you can just like ask it literally any question I've ever wanted to ask Lenny Ratchetsky. I'm like, let me just like talk to Lennybot real quick. And it's not the same, because I do feel like Lenny, being a human, would react differently to a lot of the questions, whether out of fatigue or annoyance or, just human things. But what's really cool about Lennybot is like, it always is going to cite resources and like give you more to like dig into. It won't, however, one thing it's not programmed to do, which is very clear, is it won't necessarily build shit for you. Like, it's not like, a wild and free, like it's not like the wild west of LLMs. Like it does have parameters about how to use Lennybot. It's like talking to a person, but Lenny is not going to build your PRD for you. So Lennybot won't either, but it'll tell you what content to learn like from like what to read. But what I think is fascinating about this, so it's hosted by this product I think called Delphi, or it was created by it was created by this, of which I think Lenny is like an investor in. And it's basically like take your persona and put it into something that someone can query and talk to. So if you ask the same questions all the time, or if you answer the same questions all the time, if you get the same questions over and over again, if people are constantly asking for like resources or whatever, like, do you have any blog posts about this, or do you have any episodes about that? You can literally create this like bot version of yourself that just surfaces that information, and you can codify it in a way where it would react and answer questions in a similar way to you. And what's pretty cool is like obviously like you got to give it inputs, so you can feed it. If you're someone who hosts podcasts, you have books, you write, like you are a thought, I hate to say a thought leader, you are a thought leader in some kind of way, and you have lots of your insights out in the wild. You can feed your bot all that, and it can even talk like you. Like it can learn your voice and speak like you as well. And I think that's the part that kind of low-key freaks me out, because which I actually did turn it on because I was curious, and it sounded like Lenny, maybe not in exactly the way that he would reply all the time, but like I was like, this is Lenny's voice. This is wild. It's wild. So that's been blowing my mind. And there's one other I'll give, but I'm curious if that's triggered anything for you.
Okay, yeah, I really like that. It's funny because when I see new AI tools now, I'm like, okay, for my use case, I can do that in Cloud Code. Right? Like,
you're like, I can make that.
Like you should totally use this product. But yeah, I could store all my context and stuff I need to refer back to like in my own context files, and then just ask Claude Code to query it or make connections. Okay, go on. I want to hear your others.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. So the other one that I do think is wild, there is a specific use case for it. So I don't want people to totally like rag on this idea, but I do agree. Like it's something it's controversial. That's what it is. Synthetic users. I don't know if you remember synthetic users.
No.
Okay, you might want to go back to it. I actually don't know, though, if they have the open beta still. They probably don't. It's probably paid now only. But synthetic users is basically, it's a database of like 10 million literal synthetic users. Like these are not real people, but they are based off of real personas. Mm-hmm. And possibly, we don't know 100%, but possibly also real like human data that I don't know the details on how it was sourced. From what I understand, it is a finite database of, again, 10 million people, and it was designed for product managers in contexts where they have no customer facing anything. Like they don't have any interaction with customers.
Right.
They might not even have interaction with like they might not even have data on customers. And it might actually, like in a world where they desperately need customer insight or like user insight, their entity may not provide that, or like it's illegal to. So like healthcare, for example, is like finance, healthcare, like those are really popular. Banking, those are industries where like access to the customer is actually sometimes illegal, like not allowed, and also to really, really, really highly regulated and hard to get. So synthetic users was designed, again, like for product managers who want to query, or like, I think that they used to do it by like problem space versus solution space. And also I think a little bit of job to be done, but not like in that language, at least, where you'd basically tell synthetic users, I want to talk to like 5 people who fit this profile, who have this problem. And then you can just talk to those people and like query them. Mm. You can also do it where like, I want to talk to 5 people who fit this profile, but who also are considering or like, I want to talk to them about this specific solution. You can talk to them and like chat with them, ask them questions, depending on, again, your inputs, like depending on like what you tell it, you might be able to like literally be like, yep, this is the solution. This is what it does. Here's how we think about it. You can ask them like, what's important to you? Like what would cause you, like what would give you pause? What would work versus not work? And like you can talk to it, like interview them just like you're interviewing like a real person. It is really cool. It is also like, because LLMs, I bet it's even better now, because that was like 2 or 3 years ago that I was using synthetic users. But back then, and this is still a challenge, LLMs are very affirming. They want to please you. Mm-hmm. And they like, it is a little hard to get it to like be real with you, so to speak, without prompting. So, but I will say it is really cool. I think it's really more designed for, again, industries and products or like teams that just have no customer access. And it's like we see this a lot with like large organizations, and like these teams they might not have ever talked to a customer or even gotten a recording of a customer. Like it's like customers are like locked down in some of these corporations and organizations. So that's
Yeah.
where I think it makes the most sense. I do
Yeah.
not think it is a replacement, especially if you're smaller and it is possible and feasible for you to get access to customers. But if you can't, like literally, like you are regulated against that, I think synthetic users is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Not ideal, but it's still better than nothing. And I think that's the thinking is like, would you rather have nothing or would you rather have something? And I think
Right.
people would rather have something, but it's cool.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
cool.
Interesting. I'll have to look back at that.
Oh,
Well,
go ahead.
I mean, the few others that just so we are now both Granola users.
Yes. Love Granola.
So I love Granola. It just feels like the easiest, best um, transcription tool. Was that what you would call
Yes.
it? So, and
It's note taking. It's like meeting notes
Yeah.
without the bot that joins the call.
Right.
It operates off of computer audio. So it's discrete. It's like a very discrete note taking tool. But what I love about it, I don't know if you knew this, it supports multi-language. I've been doing my Spanish lessons with Granola turned on.
Oh, that's cool.
And it will summarize everything in Spanish, but it'll also summarize in English. And I can query it in any language. And it's like, yeah, dog, got you. And it like responds. It's so cool. And I can be like, what were all the words that I got stuck on? And it was like, oh yeah, these. It's awesome.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I'm obsessed. I love it. Was such a great find, Kim. Every time I use it, I'm like, this was such a good investment.
Yeah, it is a good investment.
Like
Granola is awesome. And it's great because you can very easily copy paste transcripts. So like if my context files that I've been talking about, like it's really easy to just store things, like copy and paste and store it. But then you can also query inside Granola.
totally. Yes. One of my faves. And then it's easy to share with other team members. It's pretty cool. And then like when you share notes with people, they can query it too. Like they can chat with it and be like, what are we talking about? I'm obsessed. It's excellent product design, excellent use case for AI and LLMs. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now I just wish I could hook it up to other stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that's coming. I'm sure but
right.
Anyway.
I know they have some integrations I haven't played around with yet, and you could do some zaps with it. And so, but yeah, I'd have to look into that, but I'm sure more is coming.
Totally. Well, cool. Thank you so much for joining me today as per usual. And for
this was fun.
Our listeners out there, I know there's like other super smart ways to use AI. I think that's the other part too that I like a lot is like, what are just other things that people are doing? And I do think the next phase is going to be agents and workflows. And now it's going to be like power agents and like power workflows of like doing really crazy smart stuff. But yeah, I gotta level up at some point. But I'm excited. I'm excited for what the future holds. Hopefully, the bubble doesn't burst too hard for everyone.
Right.
All right, cool. Thanks again, y'all.
All right. Thanks, everyone.